So, recording is on.
There it is. Hi. Thanks for joining. Yeah, so we'll keep this on that note of formality. We'll try to keep this very informal. Um, um, for posterity's sake, I'm Jamie, joined by Nick Chang, Laurie from the Skywoman group, and we are joined by Tianna Kennedy of the 607 CSA. And I was actually just reviewing your one pager for the new nonprofit, but I don't know if that's something we want to put any emphasis on or not.
Sure. Yeah, we exist now. So the 607 CSA is then LLC that will be dissolving into this larger thing that is now called the Catskills Agrarian Alliance.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wasn't.
It'll still be a program, but it won't be an official entity of its own anymore.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So cool. So we did prepare some questions. We tried to go through as much of the just amazing information that's out there, and some of the stuff that you sent us. By the way, we really love that one diagram that I think Ryan is.
Yeah, Ryan and I made that. Ryan is a designer genius, and that's my brain in there.
Yeah. So I'll throw out there. Yeah, right. Yeah, it was really well put together. So it would be just awesome to just also connect with Ryan if he has more interest in somehow help collaborating on anything anywhere we can help.
Yeah, definitely. He was in a bit of a crunch and is in Philly doing presenting design at this big nonprofit down there right now. So otherwise would be joining us. So, yeah.
Oh, great. Yeah, so I think we want to just like really kind of just drill in on the thing that kind of came out, because we have all this amazing material that we don't want to try to just reduplicate. There's a couple of just kind of like low-hanging fruit thing, like going through the tool chain of like things you use, just because that's like invaluable just to know, oh, okay, they're using, a Google Sheet for that thing, or they're using this, service. And maybe let's just run through that real quick, get warmed up. So first off, like for purchasing, when you have, I guess, really kind of any customer facing, whether customer is, kind of a larger buyer or just an individual, person. Like, oh yeah, Nate, thank you for going ahead and sharing your screen, because I'm just going to gab and Nate's going to capture a lot of this stuff in Miro. So for retail, wholesaling, any of those purchasings, Tianna, what do people sign into when they purchase?
Yeah, well, I mean, historically, it had just been a Squarespace, website store with products that we made, and so things have shifted over the years, and then that would just be aggregated into like this crazy Google spreadsheet monster that I can talk about at some point. But like currently, and then for wholesale, we would just send out like a fresh sheet and kind of do very archaic like email stuff.
Email gets used a lot, right?
Yeah, and then enter that into, then throw that into that spreadsheet in various ways. So it was a lot of like manual stuff. These days we're using Fellow Farmer as a software company. So our customer facing or member facing, product or software is Fellow Farmer. And then we sort of have a hybrid backend of sometimes using their app and sometimes just like creating another little Google spreadsheet pack list and ops report based on that for manifests and things. So it's sort of a hybrid model often of inputs from phone calls or customer service or whatever, and then integrated into our operating document, whatever that happens to be.
Mm-hmm. So that would probably then encapsulate most other things that are not in Fellow Farmer. So if you're doing, so if you're like working out, even like for like mutual aid, let's say,
Yeah.
those would be like your phone calls, emails.
Exactly. It's usually, although we are, I mean, the one cool thing about Fellow Farmers, they do have sort of a like work against credit project. So you can allocate a certain amount of money to a pantry, say, and then they can just order from the wholesale sheet, against that line of credit, and that's their like CSA program, sort of.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah.
So that's a cool feature, and that's something that we're trying to integrate. But yeah, generally we have two different models for the mutual aid. One is just that, here's our fresh sheet, the same as the restaurants get, and order whatever you want from all 40 of the farms. And either they have the funding or we have the funding, and then we work that out in the back end about invoicing. Or, we have this other standing project with one of our groups that is sort of more like a curated USDA food box that has, milk, bread, eggs, veggies, and beef. And we just get a box count for them every month and then fulfill those. So yeah, those are sort of the two models that we use for our mutual aid, but they sort of integrate well into the systems that we already have.
Yeah. Now, on the flip side, I think the other thing I was wondering about, which may not be different in any way from those things, but for like inventory and catalog management, of course, like Fellow Farmer does a lot, for like the catalog management aspect of things. But is there like a way that you are there any like behind the scenes like tools that you use to like?
Oh, it's just another spreadsheet. we have a big spreadsheet that has all of our farmers, all of their products, and then with the pricing for the various iterations of wholesaler, retailer, whatever, and then also inventory column, because some of the things most of it is like just in time, where they just deliver it on Mondays and then we pack it. But for some of the further flung and or protein, farmers, they just bring a bunch of beef and we stick it in a freezer and then we keep track of it. But it's all like a human being counts it and puts it in the spreadsheet.
Yeah. And so then to visualize, is that spreadsheet then something like when whether you're sending an email or speaking on the phone, or even have like Fellow Farmer open in another tab, you're kind of like just transferring that?
Yeah, it's usually, I mean, we have certain quotas that farms can reach per week, and so that's where the Fellow Farmer comes in, because if somebody orders more than a farmer has, it'll say inventory is at 0. But, for many of the items, it's kind of at infinity, and so that's really not a problem. Yeah, so it's, and then in terms of the ones that are just like finite in our storage, we just keep a close eye on that and call the farmer and reorder when we need to. So it's very infrequent that we run out of stuff, but when we do, it's sort of by design. For instance, we work with a grass-fed beef producer that will only sell choice cuts once he sells all of the hamburger, because he's selling by the cow. And so we're trying to educate our consumers that there's only so many steaks in one cow, so so that's part of our kind of member education project, more than just like, oh shit, we ran out of steak, we need some more. So
yeah, but get another steak cow. What was I just going to think? Oh, so when customers, the ones who are your more interacting over email and phone, do they like tend to like ask then? Are they like the ones who kind of prompt on like, we need this much kale, are they just kind of asking what's available a lot of the time, or they kind of know at this point?
Yeah, no, we do have, we send out that email once a week that is our fresh sheet. So it just says, this is what's available, and, in this quantity. And so, if we do have a finite amount of vegetables per se, then they, if that's when the communication happens. So if we only have 7 cases of kale available for some reason, then, and one customer buys them, then we just say it's out of stock and tell everybody else they're SOL. But usually we have enough farms in our network that we can make it work. Just call somebody else and say, hey, do you have kale? Can we sub in for this other order? I mean, which is why it's great because we're all kind of small, but we've done that a lot this year. Just maybe Star Route will get their own orders from their own connections, but then run out of something, and we'll call in from one of the other farms to just sub that order so that person is happy, and just we're transparent about it. Like, hey, we had to sub in this, this many collards, but you'll like them. They're our friends, so yeah.
Yeah. And so do you, for like moving into like more order fulfillment, I'm assuming probably the spreadsheets handle a lot of things like pick lists and just like knowing what's going on, which truck. Yeah.
We have I guess one system that may be different than it's customary is that because we're aggregating so many farms, much of the we send out an email on Fridays to all the farms that I can give you guys an example of, that is just a list of the farms, a list of the products, and the numbers. There's no financial information disclosed, but it's just one email that goes out to all 40 of the farmers, so that farmer X knows he has to bring this many eggs, and farmer Y knows he has to bring this many chickens or whatever. And all of those, the most of the farms don't know and don't care where their food is going. They're like, how many milks do I bring this week? Yeah. And so all of the like pack list stuff is dealt with in-house on Mondays. The only place that breaks down is the vegetables, where it's really helpful to just have the farmers pack them at the farm, and then we don't have to like shuffle things around. So we have this like really archaic, silly thing called a rolling order doc, which is basically just a Google doc. and we share it with all of our vegetable farmers, and then we just copy and paste the orders that we receive that are only applicable to those farms in the farmer's email, or in that rolling order doc per week, so that they can pack by producer, or by customer rather. So, and then all we have to do in-house when we're aggregating everything else is just shuffle boxes around. So this goes to this pantry, this goes to this restaurant, whatever. And one pantry may order from 6 different farms, and 6 different farms may pack and deliver those boxes for that pantry, but then we aggregate it into delivery piles, But so that's how we handled that, when it's not, most of it's agnostic of customer, but for the veggie farmers, because there's so many, it changes every week and whatever, it would just be too hectic to try to like pack per order in the place. So that's how we handle that. However, so that's for that. But for the CSA, we have like, we're doing because we're talking about wholesales and pantries and everything else. So those are all sort of different like enterprises, but the CSA, it's also an enterprise. So we have shares that people order of all the various products, but people can also order a la carte anytime they want. So they can just, get milk every week, but chicken every once in a while or whatever. So we're packing all of that over there while we're packing all the wholesale orders of all the other stuff. And that takes the morning, and there's one team that does that. And then in the afternoon, there's a whole nother section of the barn that gets all set up. And that's when we pack the aggregated CSA. So there's 3 main contributing farms for that. And we have a little signal group, which is another thing that we're using, that we call Veg Mafia, that we just like haggle on Thursday about who's bringing what. And then on Monday, everybody shows up with their stuff, and all the farmers help pack the CSA shares. So it's like a crazy farmer, work gang of like packing all these bins. And so that's how the CSA shares get packed. But that's different than like specific orders from specific farms going to specific places. That's just like the who gets what veggie share that goes, there's like 340 a week or whatever that get like shipped all over the place. So this is not a very linear conversation, but I hope this is
it's a lot. Well, it's it's why I don't want to like stick too closely to these questions.
Yeah.
Just to kind of make sure I'm understanding correctly, like you're talking about like on the Monday morning.
Yep.
So then it looks like Monday morning is this, like the weekly shares, a la carte orders, wholesale, and then the afternoon the reason why you need to do that with like the group chat is because everyone's growing all different things
Yep.
all at different times, and then like that just needs to be figured out because people just paid for X amount of vegetables per week.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Cool.
Yeah, and we just want to make sure it's diverse and that everybody's not bringing onions all at once or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, everyone just gets 40 pounds of lettuce this
Yeah.
week. Sorry.
Yeah. In the spring, that's really what everybody wants.
Yeah. So yeah, so I just want to like move into like what I think we really were kind of interested in is like, value exchange, right? So that's like a very, kind of boardroom term, but like, like really like what, there's some things, like when we were describing how like, if a mutual aid group, has a special request or something like that, that like, oh, this one person, like, they didn't really get in as much as they thought they would, but people, right? So that's like some of the value, I think, right, of like not just being like, well, crap, well, we're just one farm, so we can't just like, it'll be another like, 60 days before we get more of that,
Yeah.
But like what, I guess maybe to start off with, like, how would you categorize like the different people who take some sort of value from this, and contribute back, right?
Yeah. So who are the players? Is that sort of the question?
Yeah.
Well, we have a bunch of farms, and the value that they get out of that is that we're about 4 hours from the city or any like really robust market. So we are trying to be a market for these. We're trying to help them, place their products. And the other players are CSA members upstate and down, and we deliver to all over the Catskills, Otsego, Schoharie, and Delaware County, and then also sort of on the 28 corridor down to Phoenicia and Kingston and a little bit in Hudson sometimes. And then we also do Bronx, Manhattan, Queens, Brooklyn, all over the place down there. So we have about 40 locations. So CSA members receive food and we receive help in the spring, just like a regular CSA. And that is actually very helpful for us. We still rely on those funds in the spring. So that's the CSA model itself is still viable and helpful for us. But also many of the locations benefit because they get foot traffic and they get to support, they have like, something that's fun for the community. They don't get paid. All the locations they get a free food, free share for whoever's managing it. But it's like really a community service that those guys are providing. So the community benefits and hopefully they benefit. Sometimes it's more of a pain than a benefit, but and then
I got one of those shares recently. Someone at Supermoon I knew needed a manager, kind of.
Oh, cool.
And I was like, oh yeah, I can see what happens.
I hope it was okay. I hope your tomatoes weren't smushed.
Yeah.
And then let's see who else. And so then there's mutual aid groups, and so it is actually mutual aid because, for instance, during the pandemic, we raised a bunch of money and we're able to just like give a bunch of food away. But these days we're running out of money and they have funding, and so they're paying for the food now. So it's like it's coming back around and they're really helping us out, and that's really cool.
Oh, that's really cool.
And we work with 20 some groups that all do at least a couple hundred families distributed to every week. There's also this really cool project that we're doing that's called Farm Stand, that one of the mutual aid groups that did a lot of coordination for a bunch of the other mutual aid groups kind of got tired. They were a bunch of chefs and they got tired of throwing fancy dinner parties to fundraise. They were tired of that milieu. And so instead they're cooking the food and going to like the far reaches of Brooklyn and just having direct farm stands with the community and conversations about the farms and farming and like about food. And it's just like a really beautiful project. And so we're hoping because a lot of the mutual aid groups have also been coming up to the farm, and that's like another value proposition thing as I get to a little bit of R&R after like slogging away for free down, doing all these distributions all the time. But it's now we're communicating with the actual like recipients, and we're hoping that we can get a bunch of those guys up to the farm too.
Sure.
So that's a really cool project. And then upstate, we have a lot more just like traditional food pantry kind of charity driven stuff.
Yeah.
But that's still cool because we're working with a very kind of conservative group upstate, and it's a way to kind of break through that barrier and have like conversations with people that we might not normally have conversations with. So that's cool.
Mm-hmm.
So, and sometimes we do restaurants. So we still have a couple of restaurants accounts. So those guys, we have some, farm stands, like people that are buying our food and then reselling it at their farm stand locally, but, transparently from other farms. Yeah. And we have a couple of markets also. I think that's all the players. Oh, no, also we're doing farm to institution work. So we have a bunch of new relationships with the BOCES School District and the SUNY Delhi, SUNY Oneonta, and then also a lot of K through 12 schools. And that's been really cool because normally some of these schools, we live in a really poor area of New York, and some of the schools don't have enough in their budget to meet minimum requirements for some food hubs, for local food hubs. But because we're so small, because we're all such small beans, we're like, oh, we can do 10 cases of whatever, no problem, and we'll drive it there. So that's been pretty cool to like find a scale that works for everybody. Yeah, I don't know.
Those are the requirements for the kind of more like USDA, farm to.
Yeah, or even like bigger players like Headwater Food Hub. They're just like running a tight ship, and they can't really afford to drive all over the place to drop off a couple things.
Gotcha.
So, right. Even the more righteous of these smaller.
Yeah. Well, even if they have some degree of funding, they're just not doing volumes that
exactly
the kind of private sector can
justify. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, very cool.
So yeah, I guess those are the main like participants.
That's awesome. Yeah. I'm like really curious. Like sometimes, well, like we were saying before, like at the beginning, I was like have my feelings about the farmer label on people's backs, but I'm always really interested in kind of the individuals, but because also they're from a technologist perspective, like they're also the ones putting all the data in, right? They're capturing the data, but I think that gives a pretty good view. So the other thing too is obviously with so many different players, right? It's not just about like kind of plugging in all the numbers of all those different players, but like also meeting like real needs that aren't really easily quantifiable, right? But have to kind of boil down to quantities a lot of the time, right? Dollars and bushels. So how do you I don't know how the best way to start that, but like what does that agreement process? You said I think on Signal there's a lot of that kind of hashing out who's bringing what each week.
Yeah, that's mostly just for the CSA because we have like standing CSA farms that were like the CSA is it's like two enterprises. There's like the vegetables and then everybody else. So the finances are handled differently for those two enterprises too. So the vegetable, they're more like partners, and that they may not get the retail value of their veggies, but it's more like a percentage of income split. Whereas everybody else is just like, here's my wholesale price. You can mark it up, but you need to pay me my wholesale price. So that's where the Signal stuff gets hashed out. But I think for all the other partners that you're talking about, like how do those relationships get made and what does that look like? We have developed, it's a capacity thing. We have staff now that handle various things. So there's one designated part-time staff person that handles the relationships with the schools, because that's a whole thing, and it's a lot of communication, a lot of organizing. And then there's another dedicated staff person who was one of just the mutual aid people that I was talking about, one of the chefs that was just doing all this free labor, and I was just like, somebody's got to pay this person.
Yeah.
So just like killing it, and you know, we were working with them closely every week, and so they're now a staff person that is handling a lot of the mutual aid work in the city, and they're like of that world, and so that's great. And then, you know, there's a whole little team that handles the CSA. There's like, you know, 3 people that are just slogging away all the time trying to deal with the communication with the managers and the members, and you know, dealing with all the tech, you know, whatever, the you know, creating the pack sheets and everything. So, and then all the advertising and marketing, and you know, so there's like a whole little business group that's dealing with the CSA. But yeah, and then we have an advisory group that is comprised of the CSA farms. We have another advisory group that's comprised of the mutual aid group, so that helps us with the decision making. Yeah, and then just the, you know, at this point we have like 20 people working on this project, so it's a pretty big, robust team.
Yeah.
But
so I guess that does like facilitate a lot of kind of
yeah,
like beyond just like working out quantities and prices. You know, when it comes time to just decide, for instance, like when's the truck need to be there, there's somebody who's, you know, who kind of has kind of ownership over that.
Exactly. There's like, there's the logistics person, and there's the whatever, and all that used to be me, and then I just got really burnt out, and so I stopped funding during the pandemic and built out the team a bit. But that funding was supposed to be like a 5-year funding runway or whatever, but then they backed out after year 2 because they got married and bought a farm. And so it puts us in a really awkward place of having spent a year building out this amazing team and doing all this great work, and then being like, oh no, now what? You know, is it going to be back to just me typing away at the computer, or like, are we going to try to find funding to match this, or, you know? So that's where we're at right now. But yeah, there are designated people doing designated jobs with me sort of as the hub, because I know each of those jobs intimately, so I can communicate or step in or problem solve or whatever. But in terms of pricing in general, we generally, one of our values is just to give the farms whatever they need. So we're not trying to lowball anybody, and we're not trying to be a profitable project, because there's just not going to be enough of a margin to make it work anyway. So we're just like, screw it, let's just get the farmers what they need. And we mark it up a little bit just because there's always loss, and, you know, it covers a bit of transportation or boxes or bins or whatever, but it's not like, you know, it's not a real business model. I would not look at us as like a viable business.
You're providing other values other than just the deal you provide on the, you know, cost per pound.
And I think we'd have to work with farms at bigger scale and more mechanized processes in order to really like make it work as a business, and we're not interested in that. We're really interested in working with like crappy little family farms that are like, they're not crappy, but, you know, but like that don't have capacity or efficiencies, and that's why we like working with them, because often like the products are beautiful. Everything is really beautiful. The food is great. So
usually self-described crappy little farms. I know some of those.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
So I guess, like, are there like kind of broader, bigger decisions that are made when it comes time to like, you know, what's our, you know, are we gonna like this year, you know, zoom out to like, you know, annual kind of cycles, like, you know, are we gonna do, you know, 10 more CSAs, or are we gonna cut back by 10 more CSAs, or are we gonna?
We have an annual kind of postmortem with all the farms and everybody, and we talk about that. One thing that's been really interesting is one reason that I feel like we are successful, that's like really exciting for us, is we have kind of maxed out a lot of the farms and a lot of our capacity. So like there's a 10 pallet truck that goes to the city every week. We fill it up, and that's all we can do. We've decided not to go twice a week, you know, because we only have a team that can handle 1 day or 2 days a week of packing and delivering and stuff. We have a certain space at this farm we're using. We have 2 hub coolers, 2 really good size. I don't know what they are, like 30 by 30 or something, like pretty good, robust coolers. You can fit 10 pallets in them each, and we fill those up each week, you know, for upstate and downstate. The upstate has grown a lot because of all the farm to institution work. So we're maxing out our drivers, or we're maxing out our trucks. We maxed out the veggie farm's desire to, you know, like we are kind of happy. We've plateaued. We were growing 30 to 50% every year, and we decided that we're really happy with around 330 shares a week right now. That is, you know, ends up being like 700 members or something, because a lot of people just get every other week shares. But so we, you know, we're definitely at this place where we still have a lot of issues that we need to solve. Like, you saw our bins and bags, it's all pretty silly. So like we want to do a better,
Like much worse.
but we want to just do a better job at what we're doing before we have any more growth. You know, the next step would really be brick and mortar. It'd be like, okay, let's create a food hub with processing and blah blah blah, and that's like millions and millions of dollars, and like that becomes somebody's career. And like this whole thing is sort of like, well, it's working this year, but we could pull the plug for next year. You know, like we're pretty comfortable with that at that scale. And nobody really loves logistics. There's nobody who's like, yes, I love waking up and talking about how many cabbages are going around today. So like, you know, it's an experiment, and we're pretty happy at the scale we're at the moment. We are excited about continuing to grow the upstate stuff, just because we love the idea of like getting our food to as local as possible. And we still we feel like we haven't maxed out all of our farmers, just a couple of the veggie farms, you know, but a lot of people still have a lot of stuff that they'd love to move through us. So wholesale and all of that is, you know, an area that we're still interested in growing. But the CSA is we're pretty happy at where we're at. Also, our region, we don't want to expand our region at all. Like, if anything, we might contract it a little bit, just because we're already kind of spread thin.
The other thing is, so this question about this is the one I'm like really eager for. Like, what numbers or answers are you like most frequently like tracking down? You know, which ones are like the ones that like are really like make or break? You know, have, you know, very little tolerance for, or, you know, thinking, especially in terms just like of, I think of it as like, you know, the kind of like whisper down the lane things, where it's like information that has to like, you know, travel through several different intermediary people, potentially devices, potentially formats. Yeah.
Well, the numbers that the farms bring per week has to be accurate. The numbers, and then the manifest of like the trucking manifest of how many bins and boxes go to which locations is something that we kind of manually create every week. So that would be cool to automate. But it's kind of hard because, you know, that's why Ryan's spreadsheet is so crazy, because there's just so many variables. But but it's really like the real-time problem solving stuff of like, oh crap, this didn't show up here, where could it possibly be? You know, where you have to like suddenly run through all your data. And that's where spreadsheets actually work really well, because you can sort and you can make pivot tables and you can be flexible and you can figure stuff out. Whereas like software, you're kind of like, shit, I don't know, because this report doesn't exist. So you have to call your guy, you know?
Yeah, it can only be on one of these 3 pages, and it's not on one of these 3 pages.
Yeah, so that's one of the problems that we've discovered this year, is that you can't actually answer that question. It's like different every week. You're just like, this week we need to know this, or like, how much have we paid all the farms versus how much, you know, they've sold, you know, because like we do this. Some farms are invoiced weekly. Sometimes we pay out quarterly if it's a CSA share, you know, and we want to make sure that, you know, because now I have a bookkeeper, I'm not on top of it as much as I used to be. And so it's like, that's a report that we need to know at any given moment when a farm calls and says, hey, so about my eggs that I've been bringing for weeks and not getting paid for. But I think mostly it's like who gets what, where, when, and how. That is the stuff that we need to track at all times. Like, why didn't this bin show up at this location? Like, where's the missing fruit share? Like, stuff like that. So in our manifest, we have columns, and I'll share. I think there's links to all of this on that PDF, so you can see kind of all of the various little Google Sheets that we use.
Sure.
But on the manifest, we have columns for like each location gets like 1 cooler, 2 blue bins, 1 gray bin, which is like the odd number, like some boxes that will be labeled 1 fruit share, 1 flower, because you can't put those in boxes, and and so we just have these like columns per thing to grab off the truck as you go. And so all of that information needs to be created from the orders that week. And so that's where like the pivot tables come in are really handy, because then you can like create those per item what needs to go where lists. But it's also just a real pain in the ass, and it's really like labor intensive.
Yeah.
And also prone to error. Like if you do something wrong, or there's a space in the product that wasn't there the last time you entered the, like it's like the data uniformity stuff is, like we used to just edit the website all the time and like change the product names and and like we learned quickly that was a mess and hard and bad. But as someone that's just, I don't know, I'm just like learning how to make websites, learning how to make spreadsheets, and just like, so it's been like trial by error, and I think I've made every mistake one can make in this.
Yeah. Oh, well, I wouldn't sell yourself short there. I'm sure there's plenty more, right?
Yeah. You're right. Knock on wood.
Sorry.
On that point, like on the PDF, like there was a mention of Airtable. I was wondering, is that a tool that you're already using, or was that more of a like, maybe Airtable could help consolidate a bunch of these spreadsheets or make some of it easier, etc.?
It's something that like, well, we were going to develop our own software, and so Ryan had been working on that and was like, oh, this does everything you needed to do. Like, why can't we just do this? And then our data engineer guy kind of dropped the ball, and that project never happened. So then I was like, I don't have time to learn Airtable. I'm fine with Google Spreadsheets. So so I think it's just like a prettier Google spreadsheet. Like I poked around a little bit, but I was just like, whatever,
That's actually really interesting to hear, because I use it a lot, like for my work, and the way that I've thought about it is, like, it's not that a spreadsheet can't do it. It's that like Airtable is set up so that like you can really easily get the connections with the data, and like that's the only thing, like the only reason why is like I can prototype a data model so much faster with Airtable than if I were to do it in Google Sheets. But like that's maybe another thing that like when I make good on what I said about the deck, like I'd be more than happy to like sit down with y'all once we like can like start to understand more about the PDF, because a lot of that information is there, and then let's talk about like where there's potential like things, Jamie, that we could even just like, maybe this is like a use case that we could just see what we could do with Airtable if we just have like the sheets that you're currently using.
Yeah.
And then that's something that, like from a Skywoman perspective.
Yeah, and Nick, I think, I'm sorry, Nick, it says Nate. I don't know.
Oh, Nate, yeah.
Okay.
Actually, my brother's name is Nick.
Okay.
Anyway, it doesn't matter. But
Nate.
I respond to either, though, because of my mom.
Because of your mom. Ryan did start making a lot of like data maps or whatever using Airtable. So he just started on that. So I think you guys should link up and talk about that.
Okay. Sweet.
Yeah, I'd love to eavesdrop on that too. Really curious to hear Ryan's perspective too. But I'm also wondering, like,
one thing I just want to say though is I think it's important to say is that because there are just so many variables in what we're doing, and there are limits to what software can do. Like,
sure, yeah,
it's like I don't want to like shit talk fellow farmer, because they're trying and they program for all of these, like a lot of variables, but then it becomes so complicated that we're having a hard time training our crew to use it, because then you have all these filters and all this stuff, and it works, it's logical, it's doing its job, but then there's just multiple ways to get to information, and then that gets confusing if you get two different results, because you're using a filter or you're not using a filter, and then like then you don't trust yourself or the data, and then it's just like everybody just the morale goes to shit. And so it's not that the software necessarily doesn't work, it's that our model is so complicated that it maybe software isn't the best choice for it, or it is for a particular part of it, and we just need to be more strategic about that. And so I think we're like, this year's lesson is like, okay, we hit the wall and X, Y, in so many different ways. Let's regroup and figure out how to handle that information.
Well, it seems like, correct me if I'm wrong, it seems like you kind of know the most like important kind of metrics of all, which is like, how many pallets fit on the truck, how many runs to the city do we want the truck to do?
Yeah.
How many shares does that make? Like,
yeah.
First of all, that's all stuff that like, you hold in your head already.
Yeah.
Right. You don't need to look at a screen to tell you that.
Yeah.
And that's really important. I think that like you've made like some good decisions about what you need, what you're trying to do.
Yeah, totally. And then the other thing is, and this is something, that I will say, is that I also know what I need. I'm not at all like confused. Like I have very clear, like I need these reports and I need it to look like this, and this is why. And the thing that has really screwed us up this year is that one thing that is like incredibly important that we haven't talked about yet is that in this model, because we have a CSA model, it's super important for our members to know when they're getting what, especially because sometimes it's a la carte, sometimes it's not. And where we had a horrible, disastrous spring and fall was when fellow farmers sent out an auto email when people signed up for the CSA. They told them a start date that was the first week, and we have an A/B week system. So regardless of how many times we've told them that wasn't the case, they're gonna hedge their bets and go the first week anyway. Like I'm saying, if you have two sources of truth, you don't know which one to believe, and then it's chaos. And so the spring and the fall both had the same. We made the same mistake twice, where like everyone all 700 people got the email that said show up day one, and all hell broke loose. And then it was like weeks of trying to like clean that up, and then just getting stable, and then it happened again. So like having a calendar view or having some way for people to know when they're getting what is, and it's especially good because if there are data flaws or something, or we do mess up in some way in customer service, they can see it ahead of time and let us know, and we can fix it before it happens. And that saves so much time and energy and money. And we figured that out in our Google spreadsheets and had a beautiful little stupid Google version of that. And we were like, we will use your software if you make sure we have this calendar view, and they never did it, and it's been hellish.
Yeah. Something. Yeah, there's like some things that are sticking out to me, I think now. The spreadsheet, right, is kind of like, it's kind of your source of truth,
right?
And I think one of that, the spreadsheet has certain like people who, like you, obviously, who know how to use it. Some bit of like kind of control over who will access that, and then whatever they need to disseminate that through email, whatever. So in some senses, like, would you say like that system is kind of working as like that, like kind of control over that source of truth? And
it's really helpful, especially for that real-time problem solving, when you're just like, oh shit, like what was you can just go to the raw data from the orders and just be like, okay, now I know. Like, whereas with the software you don't have that. But like, and then we can just create simple reports to send to people that look the same every week. If you're a driver or if you're a farmer, you don't need to see the whole mess behind the scenes. You just get your email that or if you're packing boxes, it just looks like this. So, but the problem is all of that is really labor intensive to create, because we are self-taught and it's dumb and whatever, or it's not dumb and there's formulas involved, but they're all invisible, and if you forget to drag them down, then you get mistakes. And so like when we had this debacle with the dates with the software, I was like, whatever, we'll just go back to the spreadsheets. And then I just got PTSD. I was like, oh God, I can't do that.
Oh no.
So like, we're kind of in the, well, let's see what other software is out there moment.
Well, it's hard to build redundancies that way, right? If you're then, because it's not just the spreadsheet, right? There's
Right.
also is that human component of being able to interpret and
Right.
process it, right?
Yeah, and it took like 3 or 4 months to train the 2 other people that know how to use it. And if something happens to any of us, then it's the whole thing breaks. So it's like, and it is so tedious, and like none of us want to spend our lives that way.
Yeah. What parts, aspects of it, like when you say it's tedious, like what do you have in mind?
Well, for instance, and I know you guys are thinking, well, you can automate things, like because okay, but we like part of it is like the way that we pack our veggies, right? So you have we have a blue bin that has 2 veggies in it, and then a gray bin that has 1 veggie in it, and so each location gets those. But we have to figure out, so there's like whatever 274 veg shares for the week, and the farmers just know that, and all they need to do is create their little line, and but we need to give them account for how many blue bins and gray bins are upstate and how many blue bins and gray bins are downstate. And then for the drivers, we need to break that out by location, and so when we get the orders, it just says veggie share. So there's like this whole like 10 or 12 step process of like creating a pivot table, getting those veggie share orders, like doing the math, turning them into like 2 and 1, for the odd and evens, breaking that down by location, doing the data entry into the other, whatever. So it's like those sorts of things, or creating a pack sheet where there are certain, like, you could just clean up the orders a little bit and just send that as a pack sheet. But the way that the human brain works is like, if you don't bold and make the redundant, like if somebody gets 2 chickens, you have to make that big and like obvious, and like otherwise you just skip it because you're just packing thousands of things all day long.
They're just looking for the chicken where they just assume it's always going to be 1 because
exactly. So there's all these like little like edits you have to make it like readable, or like you have to put boundaries around the location so you don't just like keep packing and then realize it's a different location that you're packing for, like. So there's like all these like little like formatting things that we've learned over the years that you have to do, that all have a reason, and but like it would just be annoying to have to like print out a sheet per order, because that's just like a crazy amount of like paper, so we consolidate it, but it's also annoying to have an app. We tried using fellow farmers like packing app, but then you just hit pack, and then at the end of the day, when you have 3 milks sitting on the table and you're like, shit, who didn't get their milk? Like it's really hard to like go through, because with the app you can't like go through. But with a spreadsheet, you can be like, oh, this person ordered 3 milks and maybe they didn't get them, so we can at least check that order. There's like some problem solving that you could do to like make sure you don't mess up at the end of the day.
Sure.
That spreadsheets do that apps don't do. So,
Yeah. The other thing I'm curious about is what things that, like, what information is like hardest to get into the spreadsheets, right? So like, like the ones that maybe are not like dependent on like other people maybe, or people outside of 607, who you have to like kind of wrangle, or.
Well, there's always like the last minute requests that are always a pain in the ass, like, oh, hey, I'm going to be upstate. Can I pick up my stuff at this other spot? Or like, the one that happened last week was a chef ordered chickens and I packed these chickens. And then he was like, I don't want those chickens. I wanted the other chickens. So if that used to work when I was the single source of truth, or spoke with everybody, because I would be like packing and be like, oh, wait, he wanted these other chickens. But when there's like 4 people involved, the orders came through for chickens, the packers packed the chickens, like nobody knew that he wanted one farm's chickens and not the other farm's chicken. And so like, like little notes or idiosyncrasies, or like when you're delivering all over the place to crazy places, there's like all these little secrets of like how to get to the spot.
Don't use that door. Don't.
Yeah, exactly.
Real answer there.
So it's like somebody gets sick or whatever, and then you have to deliver to the school, and it's just like this crazy labyrinth, and you don't know what you're doing. Like, so there's, we've done workarounds for all of that, but those things are hard in spreadsheets.
Yeah. What about from the more like supply end? So from like,
Well,
is it? It sounds like the farmers you're working with like are.
we've
My
trained.
assumption is like you're working with the right people who have the same kind of approach of just like train the right people to do it right. And
Yeah, the farmers that we're working with are, you know, we're all youngish, or we were young at some point, but we're all like, you know, farmers that are new. But a lot of us have done markets or have sold to restaurants before, so there's like a pack continuity and quality. You know, a lot of the farmers that are part of the CSA I had marketed with, so I knew their food, I knew their quality, I knew their, like, you know, their farms intimately, I knew they were clean, I knew, you know, like, and so it's just a level of professionalism that we just like expect. When we do have new farms that, you know, like we're working with the Amish community right now, and they just like pack into like shoe boxes or whatever they find, and because, you know, they don't want to have to pay for boxes, which makes sense. And so, you know, we have to do some education and or some repacking or whatever. Their food is beautiful, so that's not the issue. So, you know, but like part of, again, our inefficiencies are that we are willing to work with small family farms. So we basically just bend over backwards to do whatever it is that they need, and then try to make the rest of the model work for the farms, you know. Like, yeah, it's sort of like a push and pull between like the members and what they want and the farms and what they want, and the rest of it is just like coordinated to try to serve those two groups. But it is, I mean, it is kind of a free for all, like open market economy thing, where it's just like I'm willing to have redundant suppliers, and if someone like wants it more than the other and they end up, you know, getting the orders, and that's just the way it is. You know, I'm not. So there is a little bit of like white label stuff happening in the background, and that's something that Ryan has in the spreadsheet. Is like we get so many egg orders a week that we, you know, all the little egg farmers can't supply them all, so we'll just have like white label, like non-organic but pasture raised, and then white label organic eggs, and then we do some back end, like, let's prioritize this farmer stuff, you know. But it's not really so much about us liking one more than the other as much as their capacity. So we're like, okay, 45 from these guys, and then we have to move to these guys in order, you know, whatever. And, you know, and like, for instance, if one of the farms also supplies lamb and, you know, pizza crust or whatever else, then they'll be the last egg supplier because someone else is just supplying eggs, and that's their sole source of income from the CSA. So, like, whatever, those guys are getting money through beef and other stuff, so they're fine.
Yeah. I've just noticed that we've got like 2 minutes. I don't want to, I've got to hold back, but Nate, I meant to give more time since you've been doing so much just typing, I'm sure you have lots of questions.
Secretary work. Thank you, by the way.
Oh, no, I like this a lot. I have so many questions. I think it'll be more like processing this stuff, and then whenever I sync up back with you, Tianna. I have some questions specific to like more about the deck stuff, which I think I'll have time tomorrow. Is my guess.
Okay.
Definitely this weekend. But like just more questions about like who the audiences are and etc.
Right.
Just trying to understand more of like y'all's context, and like then like what's the best way to even like think about that structure. But I think that's my main focus. And then Jamie, I'm sure we will be unpacking a lot of this.
Yeah.
And then this actually clarified so much about the PDF.
Yeah.
So I feel like now like this was all just like passively absorbing and be like, now I'm seeing all of like the flesh come in around the skeleton. It was like what is it? It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. There's always the picture of the guy in front of the whiteboard.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is like, was that made in Miro? Like, like, yeah, that's like how all of my work lives. So I was like,
you, Charlie.
Yeah, I was like, I fuck with this because this is how all the shit that I work on seems to also end up.
Well, it's fun because, I mean, the reason I think I love all this is because I am, you know, like horribly ADD or whatever, and so it never gets boring. You know, there's so many jobs in this job that we can get lost forever.
Endlessly stimulating, just everywhere I turn.
yeah. So I mean, yeah, and it is pretty funny. When we made this PDF, I was just like, oh my god, I'm such a monster. Like, you know, we were thinking it would be really fun if we made PDFs like that for every part of your life, for like the other 7 projects, and the other end just be like, this is what my brain looks like, you know, like, you know. But at any rate, yeah, there's a lot to dive into, and I'm happy to chat at any time, and I know Ryan is too. So if you want to like, you know, speak your guys' language with him, then he can meet you on that level. I just have like the content.
Which is the most important part.
Yep.
I'm also just like really thoroughly impressed. I don't mean to like gush, but it's just like,
Oh, thanks.
kind of convinced me that like there's stuff that I could do to help you.
Oh yeah, well, help us guys because we're running out of money. I'm like, I want my friends to keep their jobs. I want to keep my job. That's, you know, that's kind of where we're at right now. Like, we're like gonna have a strategic planning retreat soon, and I was like, what's the point, you know? So,
Well, like,
it's hard because we're doing the good work. Like, I feel so proud of everything we're doing. It's like we are doing it. Like, and then we're like, oh, there goes the money. Oh well. So
yeah. Well, the
That's
thing that like
for your bridges, you know.
the thing that I'm not. Well, I'm not going to ask. I'm going to ask it by not saying I'm not going to ask it.
Okay.
That is like, you know, it's like, how does anybody else pull this off? Like, not that like anybody, you know, but like
That's the
maybe
problem.
the answer is like they don't. They
That's
find their own ways.
That's why I'm a member of Skywoman, because I certainly don't have the answers. Like, you know, I'm like, we are doing it because I work myself and everybody around me to a nub, you know, and it's not sustainable. It was like, you know, I was like, great, we'll get all this funding and then we'll have support and we'll have some, but then we scale our ambition and now we're doing like a lot more and everybody's burnt out. And I was like, God damn it, I fucked up, you know? So like, and there's no money in the food system the way it is. Like, it has to be a policy thing. It has to be the government. It has to be, you know, the USDA has to start prioritizing this kind of shit. And I think they're trying to, but it's really clunky and slow and stupid. And so like the way I see it is it has to get propped up by private people as like, you know, pilot projects. And then once everybody's like, oh, that works, then maybe there might be some support through the state or whatever. But it's really a long game. Like, and honestly, at this point, if I can make it the next couple of months, I'll be thrilled, you know. So
Let's help y'all get through the next couple months and more.
okay, cool. Thanks.
Right.
Sorry, thanks for letting me maunder for an hour or whatever.
Yeah, and I want to make sure also to follow up too. I know Nate's gonna help out with some things, and there's lots of stuff I would love to be able to help out with. I don't want to just have more time. So I'll throw some ideas towards you as they come. And
yeah, that's great. We're totally receptive. None of us are like dead set on this model or think anything is perfect. So like if anybody has any suggestions or constructive criticism or anything, we're definitely excited to hear it. This is something that I'm like, okay, guys, we're doing the thing I came up with, but it doesn't mean it's right or good. Like, and there's so many different ways to be doing this work. So we're super excited to work to develop this together. So, yeah.
let's do it.
Thanks, guys.
Right. Thanks again.
Bye.
Bye.